They went into the Appalachian Mountains to film a forgotten village, but what they brought back was never supposed to exist. No bodies were found. No clear escape route. Just a single camera, with footage that keeps changing every time it's watched. And in the final recording, the village is no longer abandoned. It's waiting. Deep within the endless stretches of the Appalachian Mountains, there are places that seem untouched by time, places where the forest grows too thick, the fog settles too low, and the silence feels heavier than it should. Among locals who have lived near these mountains for generations, stories are often passed down in hushed tones. One such story is about a village called Chestnut Hill. Officially, it never existed. There are no records in state archives, no census data, no maps marking its location. Yet, for those who claim to know, Chestnut Hill was once a small, quiet settlement built in the late 1800s. A place where families lived simple lives, farming, logging, and surviving the harsh winters together. And then, in the winter of 1936, it vanished. Not abandoned. Not destroyed. Vanished. The story might have remained nothing more than folklore if it weren't for Daniel Hayes, a young and determined documentary filmmaker known for chasing unsolved mysteries. Daniel wasn't interested in ghost stories for entertainment. He wanted answers. Real ones. It all began when Daniel visited a remote town on the edge of the Appalachian region while working on a different project. One evening, at a nearly empty roadside diner, he met an elderly man named Walter Briggs, a retired forest ranger who had spent most of his life patrolling the nearby wilderness. Walter had the kind of face that told stories before he even spoke, lined with age, eyes sharp but distant. When Daniel casually mentioned he was looking for unusual local legends, Walter went quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that would change everything. "You ever hear of Chestnut Hill?" Daniel shook his head. Walter leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Good. Most folks haven't. And it's better that way." But Daniel pressed on, curiosity growing stronger with every second. Slowly, Walter began to talk. He described a village deep in the mountains, far beyond any marked trails. According to him, older rangers had warned him about the area when he first started decades ago. They told him never to go looking for it. Not because it was dangerous in the usual sense, but because something about it wasn't right. "The forests there don't behave normal," Walter said. "Paths disappear. Sounds don't travel right. And if you go too far," he paused, "sometimes you don't come back." Daniel listened carefully, his mind already racing with possibilities. Urban legend. Lost settlement. Something more. What happened to the people? Daniel asked. Walter's expression darkened. "They say one winter night, the whole village just went silent. No smoke from chimneys. No lights. When folks from nearby areas went to check, they found nothing. No bodies. No signs of struggle. Just empty houses." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine, but it wasn't fear. It was excitement. A mystery untouched. A story waiting to be told. Within weeks, Daniel assembled a small but experienced crew, 2 camera operators, a sound technician, and a researcher named Lisa who specialized in historical records. They gathered equipment, supplies, and everything they needed to document what they believed could be their biggest project yet. Despite Walter's warnings, Daniel invited him to join as a guide. Walter refused immediately. "I told you what I know," he said firmly. "That place ain't meant to be found again." Undeterred, Daniel and his crew set out on their own. The journey into the mountains was longer and more difficult than expected. Roads quickly turned into narrow dirt paths, and eventually into nothing but rough terrain. GPS signals faded. Compasses began to behave strangely, spinning slightly off true north. By the second day, the crew noticed something unsettling. The forest had grown unnaturally quiet. No birds chirping. No insects buzzing. Even the wind seemed to avoid the area. Their footsteps sounded too loud in the silence, as if the forest itself was listening. Lisa tried to lighten the mood. "Probably just the weather," she said, though her voice lacked confidence. Hours later, just as the sun began to dip behind the mountains, one of the camera operators stopped suddenly. "Hey, look at this." Half hidden beneath fallen leaves and dirt was a wooden post. The crew gathered around as they cleared it off. It was an old sign. Weathered, cracked, and nearly unreadable, but not completely. Daniel brushed his hand across it, revealing faded lettering. Chestnut Hill, founded 1891. For a moment, no one spoke. The legend was real. Excitement surged through the group, quickly overpowering their unease. Cameras were switched on immediately. Daniel began documenting everything: the sign, the surroundings, their reactions. "This is it," he said into the lens, barely containing his energy. "Proof that Chestnut Hill existed. We're standing at the edge of something that's been hidden for nearly a century." They pushed forward. As they moved deeper into the forest, the environment began to change in subtle but disturbing ways. The trees grew taller and closer together, their branches twisting unnaturally. Several of them bore strange carvings, symbols etched deep into the bark. Circles. Lines. Shapes that didn't resemble any language they recognized. "Maybe old tribal markings," one crew member suggested. Lisa shook her head. "No, these are too recent. And too deliberate." The deeper they went, the heavier the air felt. Then, without warning, the trees began to thin. And there it was. Chestnut Hill. The remains of a forgotten village stood before them: collapsed wooden houses, rusted farming tools scattered across the ground, broken fences overtaken by weeds. Everything was frozen in time, as if the villagers had simply walked away and never returned. But something didn't add up. There were no signs of decay that matched the timeline. Some structures looked too well preserved for being abandoned for nearly 100 years. And more disturbingly, there were no animal tracks. No signs that nature had fully reclaimed the place. It was as if the forest itself refused to touch it. At the center of the village stood a tall church, its structure still mostly intact. Its doors were wide open, swaying slightly despite the still air. Daniel raised his camera slowly. "I don't know what happened here," he whispered, "but we're about to find out." None of them realized it yet. But by stepping into Chestnut Hill, they had already become part of its story. The church stood at the center of Chestnut Hill like a silent witness to everything that had happened, and everything that was still waiting to be uncovered. Compared to the collapsed homes around it, the structure seemed almost untouched by time. Its wooden walls were darkened with age, but still firm. The tall steeple rose into the gray sky, slightly crooked, yet somehow defiant. What unsettled the crew most was the front door. It was wide open. Not broken. Not forced. Just open. Daniel signaled for the cameras to keep rolling as they approached. The wooden steps creaked under their weight, echoing louder than expected in the eerie stillness. One of the crew members hesitated. "Does anyone else feel like we shouldn't go in?" he muttered. No one answered. Daniel pushed the door further, and it let out a long, low groan, as if it hadn't moved in decades, yet resisted being disturbed. Inside, the air felt different. Heavier. Colder. Dust coated nearly every surface, yet strangely, the place didn't look abandoned in the usual sense. The pews were neatly aligned. Hymn books still rested in their holders. Melted candles stood frozen in time on iron holders along the walls. It looked like a service had ended, and no one ever came back. Lisa stepped forward slowly, her eyes scanning every detail. "This doesn't make sense," she whispered. If the village was abandoned suddenly, there should be signs of panic. Broken things. Scattered belongings. But this is too orderly. Daniel nodded but didn't respond. His attention had already shifted to the front of the church. Behind the pulpit stood a large wooden cross, slightly tilted. Beneath it was a small desk. On top of that desk lay something that made Daniel's breath catch. A book. He approached carefully, almost instinctively lowering his voice as if afraid to disturb the silence. It was a journal, bound in cracked leather, its edges worn and brittle. A thin layer of dust covered it, but it hadn't been touched in years. Daniel gently opened it. The pages were filled with handwritten entries, ink-faded but still readable. At the top of the first page, a name was written. Pastor Elijah Moore. Jackpot, Daniel whispered to the camera. He began reading aloud. At first, Chestnut Hill was blessed. The harvest was strong, the winters kind, and our people faithful. The early entries painted a peaceful picture, a small, tight-knit community living in harmony. Families attended church regularly. Children played in the fields. Life was simple, but content. But as Daniel flipped through the pages, the tone began to shift. Strange sounds have been reported in the woods at night. Some claim to hear voices calling from beyond the tree line. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Daniel continued. I dismissed these claims as fear or imagination. But tonight, I heard it myself. The handwriting grew slightly less steady. A voice, faint but clear. It spoke my name. A sudden creak echoed from somewhere inside the church. Everyone froze. Probably the wood settling, one of the crew members said quickly, though no one looked convinced. Daniel turned another page. Children have begun speaking of a tall man who stands between the trees. They say he has no face, yet watches them. Lisa stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. That's not normal folklore. That's something else. Daniel kept reading, his voice tightening. 3 villagers are missing. No tracks. No signs. They simply vanished. We organized a search, but the forest grows, confusing. Paths change. Landmarks disappear. The crew shifted uncomfortably. Outside, the light had dimmed, though it was still early afternoon. Another page. We should not have dug. Daniel paused. What does that mean? One of the cameramen asked. He flipped back a few pages, scanning quickly until he found the entry. A pit has been discovered beneath the church grounds during expansion work. The men believe it to be an old natural cavern. But there are markings on the walls, symbols I do not recognize. I have ordered it sealed. Daniel's heart began to race. He read the next line slowly. They opened it again. Silence filled the church. The next few pages were filled with frantic writing. Something is wrong. The animals refuse to come near the church. Even the dogs whine and pull away. More have gone missing. They say it comes at night. Then, the final entry. The handwriting was barely readable, as if written in extreme fear. It is not from here. It does not belong to this world. We were blind to open the ground. It lives beneath us, and now it knows us. The page ended abruptly. No date. No signature. Just a long, jagged line scratched across the bottom. No one spoke for several seconds. Then, from behind the church, a voice called out. Daniel, you need to see this. It was one of the crew members who had been checking the back rooms. They rushed toward the voice, moving through a narrow hallway behind the pulpit. The air grew colder with each step. At the end of the hallway was a wooden door, slightly ajar. A staircase. Leading down. The smell hit them first. Rotten. Damp. Heavy. Daniel covered his nose, gesturing for the camera to follow. Keep rolling, he whispered. The stairs creaked loudly as they descended. The darkness below seemed thicker than it should be, swallowing the light from their flashlights. At the bottom, they found themselves in a small basement room. But it wasn't empty. The ground had been broken open. Wooden boards lay scattered around a large, jagged hole in the floor. And from that hole, a faint, low sound echoed upward. Not wind. Not water. Something else. Something, breathing. Lisa stepped back immediately. No. No, we shouldn't be down here. But Daniel couldn't look away. He slowly stepped closer to the edge of the pit, raising his camera. The darkness inside seemed endless. As if it didn't lead underground. But somewhere far deeper. Then, from within the blackness, something shifted. Daniel stumbled back. "Did you see that?" he whispered. No one answered. Because they all had. And in that moment, they realized. Whatever had been buried beneath Chestnut Hill was no longer asleep. For several long seconds, no one moved. The basement of the church felt suffocating, as if the air itself had thickened around them. The faint, unnatural sound rising from the pit seemed to pulse, slow, heavy, almost like a heartbeat echoing through the ground. Daniel tightened his grip on the camera. His instincts screamed at him to leave, to get out of that place immediately, but something stronger held him there. Curiosity. Did you see that movement?" one of the crew members whispered. No one wanted to answer. Because they all had. Daniel forced himself to step forward again, inch by inch, until he stood at the edge of the pit. He crouched slightly, angling the camera downward. The beam of light from their flashlight stretched into the darkness, but it didn't reach the bottom. It was too deep. Far too deep for something that was supposed to be a simple underground chamber. "This isn't just a hole," Lisa said quietly, her voice shaking. "It's like a shaft, or a tunnel system." Daniel nodded, though his eyes never left the black void below. "Or something dug it out," another crew member added. That thought hung heavily in the air. The broken wooden boards scattered around the opening suggested the villagers had tried to seal it. But something had forced its way through, from below. Daniel swallowed hard. "We need to document this properly." Before anyone could argue, he pulled a small rope from his pack and tied it securely to a support beam nearby. "What are you doing?" Lisa asked sharply. "I'm not going down far," Daniel replied. "Just enough to see what's there." "That's a terrible idea." But Daniel was already lowering himself into the pit. The walls were rough and uneven, carved into dirt and stone. As he descended, he noticed the symbols again, etched deeply into the sides, just like the ones on the trees outside. Only these were clearer. More deliberate. They spiraled downward, repeating in patterns that almost seemed to move if he stared too long. "Daniel, that's far enough," someone called from above. He stopped, hanging about 15 feet down. "Give me more light," he said. A second flashlight beam joined his, pushing deeper into the darkness. And that's when he saw it. The pit opened into a wider space, a large underground chamber. "Lower me a little more," he said, his voice barely steady. Slowly, carefully, they lowered him further until his feet touched solid ground. The smell hit him instantly. Rotten. Thick. Suffocating. "Daniel." Lisa's voice echoed faintly from above. "What do you see?" He didn't answer right away. Because he wasn't ready to say it out loud. Bones. They were everywhere. Scattered across the ground, piled in corners, partially buried in dirt. Human bones, skulls, ribs, entire skeletons twisted into unnatural positions. Some looked ancient, worn down by time. Others looked far too recent. "Oh my God," Daniel whispered. "Daniel, what is it?" Lisa called again, panic rising in her voice. It's a mass grave," he said finally. A stunned silence followed. "Get back up now," Lisa said firmly. But Daniel's attention had shifted again. In the center of the chamber stood something else. A structure. It looked like a crude altar, made from stacked stones and bones fused together with some dark, hardened substance. The same symbols were carved all over it, deeper, more aggressive, as if whoever made them had been desperate. Or terrified. Daniel stepped closer, the camera shaking slightly in his hands. There were markings on the ground around the altar too, large circular patterns drawn into the dirt. Ritualistic. Intentional. This wasn't just a cave, Daniel said slowly. They were using this place for something. Before anyone could respond, a low rumble shook the chamber. Daniel froze. Dust fell from the ceiling. Small stones tumbled down the walls. "Daniel, get out of there," someone shouted. But it was too late. From somewhere deep within the darkness beyond the chamber, something moved. A sound followed. Not quite a growl. Not quite a scream. Something in between. Something wrong. Daniel slowly turned his camera toward the far end of the chamber. At first, there was nothing. Just darkness. Then, movement. A shape. Too large to be human. Too unnatural to be anything familiar. It shifted just beyond the edge of the light, as if avoiding it. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. "Do you see that?" he whispered. Above him, the crew was shouting, their voices overlapping in panic. But Daniel couldn't look away. The shape moved again, closer this time. Still not fully visible. Just a suggestion of form, tall, elongated, bending in ways that didn't make sense. And then, two faint points appeared in the darkness. Not glowing, but reflecting. Like eyes catching the light. The rumbling grew louder. The ground beneath Daniel's feet trembled. That's when survival instinct finally took over. "Pull me up," he shouted, grabbing the rope tightly. The crew didn't hesitate. They hauled him upward as fast as they could, the rope jerking violently as he climbed. Below him, the sound intensified, scraping, dragging, something massive shifting against stone. Daniel didn't look down. He didn't want to see it again. As soon as he reached the top, they pulled him out and stumbled back from the pit. "What did you see?" Lisa demanded, her face pale. Daniel shook his head, breathless. "We need to leave. Right now." Another loud crack echoed from below. The wooden beams around the hole creaked under pressure. "It's coming up," one of the crew members whispered. That was enough. They ran. Up the stairs, through the narrow hallway, back into the main church. But when they reached the front doors, they stopped. Frozen. Because something was wrong. The doors were still there. But the outside was different. The village they had entered only hours ago had changed. The angle of the buildings. The position of the trees. Even the light in the sky felt wrong, dimmer somehow, like evening had fallen too quickly. "This isn't the same," Lisa said, her voice trembling. Daniel turned slowly, dread settling deep in his chest. Behind them, from somewhere beneath the church, that same unnatural sound echoed again. Closer this time. Much closer. And in that moment, one terrifying truth became clear. They hadn't just discovered Chestnut Hill's secret. They had disturbed it. For a long moment, no one moved. The church doors stood open, just as before, but what lay beyond them no longer felt like the same village they had walked into. The sky had dimmed unnaturally fast, shifting from pale gray to a dull, fading blue, as if evening had arrived hours too early. Shadows stretched too far across the ground, bending at strange angles that didn't match the position of the sun. This isn't right," Lisa whispered. Daniel stepped forward cautiously, his camera still rolling. "Maybe we're just disoriented," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "We've been underground. It's messing with our sense of direction." But even as he said it, he didn't believe it. The layout of the village had changed. Houses that had been to the left now stood to the right. A broken fence they had passed earlier was gone. The narrow path leading back toward the forest entrance had vanished. "What happened to the trail?" one of the crew members asked, spinning in place. "It was right there," another said, pointing toward a cluster of trees. "We came in from that direction." But now, there was no clear path, only dense forest stretching endlessly in every direction. Panic began to creep in. "Okay," Daniel said quickly, trying to regain control. "Everyone stay calm. We'll retrace our steps. We stick together, no one wanders off." "Got it." They nodded, though fear was already settling into their expressions. The group moved as one, choosing what seemed like the most familiar direction. At first, it felt promising. The ground sloped slightly downward, and the trees appeared less dense. But after 10 minutes of walking, they stopped. They were back at the church. No one spoke. "That's not possible," Lisa said, her voice tight. "We walked straight. We didn't turn." Daniel turned slowly, scanning the surroundings. "We try again," he said. This time, they marked their path. One of the crew members used a knife to carve arrows into the bark of trees as they moved, pointing in the direction they were heading. Again, they walked. Again, they stayed in a straight line. Again. They ended up at the church. The carved arrows were still there. Only now, they were pointing in the opposite direction. A cold wave of realization washed over them. "We're not lost," Lisa said quietly. "We're being kept here." As if responding to her words, a faint sound drifted through the air. A whisper. Soft. Distant. But unmistakable. "Daniel." He froze. "Did you hear that?" he asked. No one needed to answer. They all had. The whispers grew slightly louder, overlapping with one another, different voices, different tones, some childlike, others low and strained. "Come back. This way. Help us." They seemed to come from the forest. From all directions. "Don't listen," Lisa said urgently. "It's trying to confuse us." But the effect was already taking hold. One of the crew members, Mark, turned his head sharply toward the trees. "That sounded like my sister," he said, his voice trembling. "That's not possible," Daniel replied. But Mark wasn't listening anymore. "She's calling me," he said, taking a step forward. "Mark, stop," Lisa warned. "I have to check." Before anyone could react, Mark broke into a run, disappearing into the forest. "Mark!" Daniel shouted, chasing after him. The others followed, crashing through branches and uneven ground. The whispers grew louder the deeper they went, almost guiding them forward. Then, silence. Complete and sudden. They stopped. "Mark!" Daniel called out, breathing heavily. No response. Only the stillness of the forest. And then, faintly, a sound. Not a voice. A scream. It echoed briefly, cut off too quickly. Lisa covered her mouth. No. They searched the area frantically, but there was nothing. No footprints. No broken branches. No sign that Mark had ever been there. It was as if he had been erased. Daniel staggered back, his face pale. "We need to get out of here," he said, his voice cracking. They turned. And there it was again. The church. Right behind them. No matter where they went, it always led back. Night fell without warning. One moment, there was dim light filtering through the trees. The next, darkness. Complete and suffocating. The crew huddled together inside the church, too afraid to stay outside. They lit what little equipment they had, flashlights, a small lantern, but the light felt weak against the overwhelming dark. The whispers returned. Closer now. Not just outside. Inside. Soft footsteps echoed across the wooden floor above them, though no one was there. The benches creaked as if something unseen was moving between them. Lisa clutched Daniel's arm. "We're not alone." A sudden thud came from the far end of the church. Then another. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. Something was inside with them. Daniel raised his camera, pointing it toward the darkness. "Stay close," he whispered. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, everything went still. Then, from the corner of the room, a shape began to form. At first, it looked like a shadow cast by their light. But it didn't move like a shadow. It stretched upward, growing taller than any normal human figure. Its edges flickered unnaturally, as if it couldn't fully exist in one form. Lisa gasped. That's what they were seeing. The tall man. The same figure described in the journal. It stood motionless at first. Then slowly, it tilted its head, as if observing them. Daniel's breath grew shallow. "Don't move," he whispered. But it was too late. The figure took a step forward. No sound. No footsteps. Just a shift in position. And suddenly, it was closer. Far too close. The lantern flickered violently. The whispers turned into a low, distorted hum. Daniel felt something brush past him, cold, unnatural. He spun around. But there was nothing there. When he turned back, the figure was gone. The church fell silent again. No footsteps. No whispers. Just emptiness. For several seconds, no one dared to speak. Then Daniel slowly lowered the camera. "We're not getting out of this," he said quietly. Lisa looked at him, tears forming in her eyes. There has to be a way. But deep down, they both knew the truth. Chestnut Hill wasn't just a place. It was something else entirely. A prison. A living trap. And whatever was beneath it was hunting them. That night, Daniel sat alone near the altar, recording one final message. "If anyone finds this footage," he said, his voice hollow with exhaustion, "do not come here. This place, it changes things. It traps you. It learns you." He paused, glancing into the darkness behind him. "I don't think it lets anyone leave." As he spoke, the camera picked up something he didn't notice. Behind him, in the shadows, the tall figure appeared again. Standing silently. Watching. Waiting. The Appalachian case file was never meant to be public. Officially, there was no record of Daniel Hayes or his crew ever entering the restricted forest zone where Chestnut Hill was rumored to exist. According to authorities, the team had simply gone missing during an independent documentary shoot. Search efforts were launched briefly, but after 2 weeks with no results, the case was quietly closed. No bodies were found. No campsite. No equipment. Nothing. At least, that's what the public was told. 3 months later, a forestry patrol unit discovered something unusual at the very edge of the mountain range, miles away from any known trail. A backpack. It was partially buried under leaves and mud, as if it had been there for some time. Inside, they found a few basic supplies, water bottles, a damaged flashlight, and most importantly, a camera. The device was scratched and dirt-covered, but still functional. Its battery, somehow, retained enough charge to power on. What it contained would never be officially released. But pieces of it found their way out. The footage began normally. Daniel and his crew documenting their journey, their excitement clear as they uncovered the existence of Chestnut Hill. The broken sign. The abandoned houses. The church. Then, the tone shifted. The recordings from inside the church were unsettling but explainable: fear, confusion, perhaps even paranoia. The discovery of the underground chamber, the bones, the symbols, disturbing, but not impossible. But after that, nothing made sense. Time stamps became inconsistent. Clips overlapped. Hours of footage appeared to be missing or replaced. In one segment, Daniel is seen speaking directly to the camera inside the church. He looks exhausted, pale, his voice unsteady. "We've tried to leave," he says. "It won't let us. The paths keep changing. It's like the place is alive." Behind him, something moves, but when he turns, nothing is there. Another clip shows Lisa sitting in a corner, whispering to herself. "They're not voices," she repeats over and over. "They're memories. It's using memories." Then she suddenly looks up, directly into the camera. It knows us now. The screen cuts to static. As the footage continues, the crew members begin to disappear one by one. No clear cause. No visible attacker. They are simply there in one moment, and gone in the next. In one chilling clip, Daniel calls out for Lisa as he runs through the forest, the camera shaking violently in his hand. "Lisa. Answer me." The whispers are louder now, overlapping, chaotic. Among them, her voice. "Daniel, over here." He follows the sound. The camera swings wildly between trees until it finally stops. Ahead, through the darkness, a figure stands. At first glance, it looks like Lisa. But something is wrong. She isn't moving. Not breathing. Just standing there. Watching. Daniel approaches slowly. "Lisa." The figure tilts its head, too sharply, too unnaturally. Then, the screen cuts. The next segment is one of the most debated. It shows Daniel inside the church again, but the building is no longer in ruins. The walls are intact. The candles are lit. The air is warm. And the pews are filled with people. Dozens of them. Men, women, children, all dressed in old-fashioned clothing, sitting silently, facing forward. None of them move. None of them blink. Daniel's breathing is rapid. "This isn't real," he whispers. "This isn't real." But the camera captures something undeniable. Every single person in the room slowly turns their head. At the exact same time. To look directly at him. The footage glitches. Distorts. Then cuts again. The final clip is the shortest. And the most disturbing. It begins in complete darkness. For a few seconds, there is only the sound of Daniel breathing, fast, uneven, panicked. Then, a faint light appears as he raises the camera. He is outside. Running. The forest blurs past him. "I found a way out," he gasps. I think I'm out." He slows down. The trees begin to thin. And then, he stops. The camera steadies. Slowly, he turns it around. What it shows makes no sense. Behind him is Chestnut Hill. But not the ruined village they had entered. This version is whole. Alive. Lights glow warmly from the windows of every house. Smoke rises from chimneys. The church stands tall and perfect at the center. And standing throughout the village are people. Dozens of them. Perfectly still. Watching. Waiting. At the center, near the church entrance, stands a tall, dark figure. It is unlike anything else in the frame. Too tall. Too still. Its form flickers slightly, as if struggling to remain solid. No face. No features. Just a presence. Daniel's voice drops to a whisper. It's not letting me leave. The camera shakes as he steps backward. They're not trapped here. A pause. They are the village. The tall figure shifts. Just slightly. And in that moment, every person in the village takes one step forward. At the same time, the screen distorts violently. A loud, unnatural sound fills the audio, like multiple voices speaking at once. Then, silence. The video ends. No final frame. No closing. Just darkness. The camera was found empty of any additional files. No trace of Daniel. No sign of the others. Authorities who reviewed the footage reportedly dismissed it as fabricated or psychological breakdown under stress. But those who have seen the leaked clips aren't convinced. Too many details don't add up. Too many moments feel real. Even now, hikers and locals in remote parts of the Appalachian Mountains report strange experiences. Unmarked trails that lead nowhere. Symbols carved into trees. Voices calling from the woods. And sometimes, late at night, a distant glow through the forest. A village where no village should be. Those who claim to have seen it all say the same thing. If you find Chestnut Hill, do not enter. Because once it knows you're there, you don't just get lost. You become part of it. The official report was brief. Too brief. Daniel Hayes and his documentary crew were listed as missing, presumed dead, after failing to return from a private filming expedition somewhere in the Appalachian region. No exact location was ever confirmed. Authorities claimed the team had ventured too deep into unstable terrain and likely succumbed to natural hazards. Case closed. No press conference. No detailed search report. No follow-up. It was as if the story had been deliberately buried. But stories like this have a way of resurfacing. Nearly 3 months after the disappearance, a local forestry patrol unit made an unexpected discovery near the outer boundary of the mountain range, far from any marked trail and nowhere near where Daniel's team was believed to have traveled. A single backpack. It was wedged between roots of a fallen tree, partially hidden under damp leaves and soil. At first glance, it seemed like ordinary lost gear. But inside, there were items that raised immediate concern. A camera. Not just any camera, the primary recording device used by Daniel Hayes. Scratched. Mud-stained. But intact. When the device was powered on, what it revealed would spark quiet fear among those who saw it, and quiet efforts to keep it hidden. The footage began as expected. Clear, steady shots of Daniel introducing the project. Wide-angle views of dense forest landscapes. Light-hearted conversations between crew members. Laughter. Curiosity. Confidence. Then came the discovery of the sign, Chestnut Hill, founded 1891. From that moment on, everything changed. The recordings became more focused, more intense. The tone shifted from curiosity to unease. Small details began to stand out, moments that seemed insignificant at first, but deeply unsettling on closer inspection. In one early clip, while Daniel speaks to the camera about the history of the area, a figure can be seen standing far behind him, partially hidden between trees. No one reacts to it. Not even Daniel. When the footage cuts and resumes seconds later, the figure is gone. As the team explores the village, the camera captures subtle inconsistencies. Objects appear in different places between cuts. Shadows fall in directions that don't match the light source. Reflections in broken windows show shapes that aren't present in the scene itself. Then comes the church. The audio inside becomes distorted at times, low-frequency hums layered beneath their voices, almost like something else is trying to speak beneath them. After the discovery of the journal, the footage grows more erratic. Time stamps begin to glitch. Clips repeat, but not exactly the same. Slight differences appear each time, like alternate versions of the same moment. In one version, Lisa stands silently behind Daniel as he reads. In another, she isn't there at all. Then, after the descent into the underground chamber, the recordings become fragmented. Short clips. Abrupt cuts. Missing segments. One of the most disturbing sequences shows the crew arguing inside the church. "We've been here too long," Lisa says, her voice strained. "Something's wrong with time. It's not moving right." Daniel shakes his head. "We just need to stay focused." "No," she interrupts sharply. "You don't understand. I've seen this already." The room goes quiet. "What do you mean?" Daniel asks. Lisa looks directly into the camera. "I've seen us standing here. Saying this. Exactly like this." A loud crack interrupts the moment. The footage cuts. When it resumes, one of the crew members is gone. No explanation. No mention. As if he was never there. From that point forward, the remaining footage feels unstable. Reality itself seems to break down. In one clip, Daniel is seen walking through the forest alone, calling out names. Mark. Lisa. Anyone. The camera pans left. The trees are dense. It pans right. The same trees. But arranged differently. As if the forest has shifted while he turned his head. Then, faintly, a voice answers. "Daniel." He freezes. "That's not possible," he whispers. The voice comes again. Closer. "It's me. I'm here." It's Lisa's voice. Daniel follows it, his breathing uneven. The camera shakes violently as he moves faster, pushing through branches. Until he stops. Ahead, a figure stands between two trees. It looks like Lisa. But something is wrong. She's too still. Her arms hang unnaturally at her sides. Her head is tilted at an impossible angle. "Lisa." Daniel says. The figure slowly straightens its head. Then smiles. But the smile is too wide. Too forced. Too wrong. The screen cuts to black. The next clip is the most widely discussed among those who have seen the leaked footage. Daniel is back inside the church. But it is no longer abandoned. The building is fully restored, clean walls, polished wood, candles burning brightly. The atmosphere is warm. Alive. The pews are filled with people. Dozens of them. All dressed in clothing from another time, early 1900s style. They sit perfectly still, facing forward. Daniel steps slowly down the aisle, his voice barely audible. "This isn't real, this can't be real." Then, without warning, every single person in the room turns their head. At the exact same time. Toward him. Toward the camera. Their faces are expressionless. Eyes wide. Unblinking. And then, in perfect unison, they stand. The footage distorts violently. Audio collapses into a deep, layered noise, like hundreds of whispers merging into one. The clip ends abruptly. Only one final recording remains. It is shorter than the others. Raw. Unfiltered. Daniel is running. The camera bounces wildly, catching flashes of trees, ground, darkness. I found the edge, he gasps. I think I made it out. He slows. The forest begins to thin. For the first time, there is silence. No whispers. No movement. Daniel laughs nervously. I'm out. I'm actually. He stops. Slowly, he turns the camera. Behind him, Chestnut Hill stands. But not in ruins. Alive. Perfect. Lights glowing in every window. Smoke rising into the night sky. Figures standing throughout the village. Watching him. Waiting. At the center, the tall figure. Unchanged. Unmoving. Daniel's voice drops to a whisper. It followed me. The camera shakes. It doesn't stay there. The figure tilts its head. And in that moment, every figure in the village takes a step forward. Together. Perfectly synchronized. Daniel stumbles back. They're not trapped. His voice breaks. They're part of it. The screen tears into static. The audio peaks into a deafening, layered chorus of voices. And then, nothing. The recording ends. No further files exist. No trace of Daniel Hayes was ever found. No remains. No evidence of escape. Only the camera. And the story it carried. To this day, officials deny the authenticity of the footage. They call it edited. Fabricated. A hoax. But those who have studied it closely disagree. Because some things in the video can't be explained. And sometimes, deep in the Appalachian wilderness, hikers report something strange. A distant glow between the trees. A quiet village where none should be. And if they listen closely, they hear it. A voice. Calling their name. Soft. Patient. Waiting.